ahead with that SCORE intro. All right. Welcome everyone to Hiring, Managing, and Developing Talent in a Small Business. We have two fantastic mentors with us today, Steve Bookbinder and Bill Halsey. They're both with the SCORE Boston chapter. And this is a new topic for us, and we're very excited to be bringing it to you today. I want to talk a little bit about SCORE as we get started. SCORE offers training. That training comes in the form of webinars, and we do have some in-person workshops. I would encourage you to watch for our newsletter or go to our website and look at the listing of webinars and workshops we have coming up, because we have a lot of fantastic topics coming that are brand new to us that I think you'll enjoy. The most important thing that SCORE does, however, is the mentoring. Our mentors are volunteers. They come to us with lots of experience and knowledge that they want to share with you. One of the most common questions I get are, who do we counsel and what stage do I have to be in my business process to meet with a mentor? You can meet with us at any time. You do not already have to have a business license. You do not already have to have a business plan. You can be at the beginning stage of, I'm not sure if I want to start a business. What things should I consider? You might be in the middle ground where you are working on that business plan. And you might be in the stage of already a business owner, and we welcome you as well and love to work with you. Business owners often come to us and they need help with accounting or marketing, or maybe they want a growth strategy. We're there at any step along the way. A beginning session is going to be an exchange of ideas. It's going to be to get to know you and what your goals are. And that first meeting will be a plan, a form will be laid down to help you reach those goals. And sometimes you'll have homework, but you can work with your mentor for as long as you like and often as you like. And we will sometimes bring in other mentors as your needs change along the way. I will put our chapter websites for our district in the chat here shortly. You can go to any of those links to get a mentor. You can also put a comment in chat, and I will have somebody reach out to you to schedule you with a mentor. We are going to primarily be working out of chat today and Q&A a little bit, and we're also going to use the raised hand. So the idea is that there are going to be some questions asked of the crowd. You can reply in chat, or you can do the raised hand. If you use raised hand icon, I will be unmuting you so that you can ask your question or make a comment out loud. You can also post into Q&A a question that you would like asked to the presenter at an appropriate time. So those are our rules for today. If you have any questions about that, you can throw a note in chat. I'll be watching it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I think Steve's going first. So it's all yours, Steve.
Thanks, Teresa. Welcome. I'm Steve Bookbinder, and you can also see Bill Halsey on the screen. We're going to be jointly going over these issues with you to help you understand what's involved in hiring, managing, and developing talent in a small business. So what do we intend to hope to accomplish today? First of all, to familiarize you with the processes that are involved in talent management. Why are people using that term more often today? Well, we want to think about an employee as someone who has talent. That is to say, someone who can really develop themselves, who can be managed, not just a resource, not just an asset to you, not just personnel in an impersonal way, but someone who can really contribute to your business. And so we're going to cover, what does it take to create a talent plan in a time of uncertainty? We've obviously been going through different sort of economic changes. First, and we're facing inflation today, which has an impact on employees in terms of their wages, in terms of our ability to hire as well, because there's a shortage of workers. We all know that. We're going to talk about hiring, including, and this is Bill's specialty, to cover the major legal issues that you often have questions about. If you're going to onboard a person, what do you have to know about bringing that person on, and what are some of the legal issues that are involved? Then we're going to talk about total rewards. Okay, what is the deal? That is to say, what does an employee get from you, and what do you give to an employee? How do you construct a deal that makes sense for both people? That's the total rewards. Everything from the work environment that you have to the pay you can give. Now, a deal is very important in a small business because you may not be able to give the same benefits that a large corporation can give. But you can also provide other things in terms of personal involvement. What's involved in managing performance? That's a very critical issue. How do you get people to do what you need them to do and to give them the feedback that's necessary? And importantly, we want to also talk about you as a leader. You're the person who's probably the scarcest talent in the organization. So how do you add value? How do you help your employees to provide value to your corporation? And we're going to try to answer any question you have, and maybe all questions, but we know that that's not possible. So if not today, in the near future. If, for example, you have a question about something that Bill has brought up and you've asked the question, but you need more clarity, this is why you come to SCORE, or you want to discuss developing a talent plan. You can come to me or to others in SCORE who can help you with that. So without further ado, what's a talent plan? Okay. Number one, a talent plan starts with talking about, okay, you have a business, you have a restaurant. How many people do you need? What kinds of people do you need? You have a home health care business. How many people do you need? What kinds of people do you need? So, what is your strategy? If, as was noted the other day in the Globe, you have a hamburger business, a hamburger restaurant in Dorchester, and you want to open a takeout restaurant in the Seaport. This was all detailed in the Globe the other day. What kind of people do you need? What kind of marketing strategy do you need? And if you need a new marketing strategy, do you need different people? So what's the right number of people you need to execute on these strategies? I want to open a takeout place. I want to open a home health care business. I want to open I want to sell a product that I have or a service that I have. How many people do you need to execute the strategy? Very importantly, it's not just, well, okay, I need a server for my restaurant, or I need someone who can help me in the home health care business, somebody who can work with elderly or disabled people. You have to, number three, determine what are the competencies you really need to execute those strategies, to really make them happen. What kind of person do you need as a waiter? What kind of person do you need as a dishwasher or a cook? What kind of person do you need that can go into somebody's home and effectively care for an elderly person or a disabled person? So what are the competencies you need? So first of all, what's your business? Second of all, how many people do you need? Third of all, what do you need them to be able to do? And then number four is pretty important as well, but you don't start with that. But it's what a kind of financial investment am I going to have to make? Because if I hire people and I don't have work for them, that's a real investment for a certain period of time. The number of people you can afford and what you're going to pay them. Then number five, again, what's the timing? It was best illustrated in this description the other day in the Globe, both by Nia Grace, who's opening a nightclub in the Seaport, and another man who's opening this takeout place. What's the timing? When will you need these people in place? So all of these factors go in. And then lastly, I really want to motivate my people to work hard for my business. So I've got to bring them on board. I've got to train them. I've got to pay them. And I also have to have workforce policies for them. So these are the 6 elements of a talent plan. And if you worked with one of us at SCORE, we'd help you think through these issues and get to a place where you're comfortable with hiring people and bringing them on. Any questions on this? Feel free to raise your hand in the chat or just let us know, okay? Any questions?
We don't have anything at this time.
Okay. So managing performance and dealing with performance isn't getting any easier. Number one, if there's a scarce amount of talent out there, you've got to think about, first of all, a job description. Remember, in the talent plan, you need to define the competencies. What sort of soft skills do you need? Do you need people who are creative? Do you need people who are persuasive? Do you need people who are collaborative? And whatever skills you're talking about, they must be job related. That's what I mean. You can't just say, well, I want a nice person. You have to sort of talk about, well, if I have a home health care aide, I need her to be able to collaborate with the family, to work, to persuade the elderly person, to be able to take his pills or her pills on time. And what are the hard skills? For example, if you have a cook, he needs to be able to really cook. If you're going to have someone who's going to be a driver for you, you need somebody who can really drive and has, a range of things depending on the business. Okay, so you always have hard skills and soft skills, and a job description can really make a difference. Most people think of it as something sort of stale, but in fact, if you write a good job description, then you've got the basis for talking to your employee and making sure that he or she understands what the job is. Now, this is a very tough market, we know. And for small business, it's very hard. I mean, I talk and Bill talks to many people every day who just tell us that they can't find the people they need. But if you find a person in this market, you need to be able to sell them on your job. You need to be able to evaluate the potential hire against that job description. I mean, is this a person I really want to hire? And then if it is a person you really want to hire, what can you say about your business that will motivate them? And that means asking yourself these questions. What motivates employees? How can I empower them? How can I trust them? To what extent do I trust them? If I have a home health care business, they're going into somebody's home and they're representing my company. Can I trust them? Are they motivated to help people? If I hire a waiter, do I know that this is a person who's really interested in hospitality? There's a restaurant owner in Boston by the name of Douglas Williams who runs a restaurant called Mita, which is very well known. And in his job interviews, he asks people in advance to come in and tell them why they're good at hospitality. That's really what's important. And once they're hired, you need to do a good job at managing performance. And what's that all about? You need to communicate what you want the employees to do, and very clearly, and how you want the individual to behave in that situation, whether it's a restaurant, it's home health care, it's a delivery service, or you're selling a product in a store. Give the individual objective, motivating, and thoughtful feedback. This can really make a difference. Most employees still report that they don't get good feedback, and at least annually and maybe more often tell them about performance. Now, I'll give you an example. I went into a store the other day in a major mall just looking for something for my wife. I asked the person, a certain cream that my wife likes to use, it was Valentine's Day, if they had it. Her response was, no, we never have it. It sells out as soon as we get it. Well, when will you have it again? I don't know. Now, what I knew right away was that the behavior of that employee, and it was a high-end shop, was not appropriate. And that's where there needs to be a communication of what's expected, how you want employees to behave. Because I walked out of that store thinking, I'm not going back. So what else do you need? You need an employee handbook, okay, that lays out what's required from employees. There are now new ads. You hear them on Sirius XM or other stations, which talk about, hey, hire us, we can do HR for you. And the ad, if you haven't heard it, says, what happens if an employee, someone complains about the fact that your employee smells? It's this very strange ad. But if you have an employee handbook, it makes clear what's expected of an employee in terms of their behavior, their dress, etc. If, for example, they work in a restaurant or in a home healthcare organization, and I use those two examples. Now, you can actually find many samples of a handbook on the internet. But here again, if you find a sample, you ought to talk with someone and make sure that it's your own and customize it to you. And again, this is where SCORE can help you. So what we've
Steve, I
covered.
have a question. I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you recommend conducting a background check before extending a job offer? What about a qualifying period for new hires?
Okay. Bill, you want to answer about give you a chance to sort of talk about background checks?
Sure. I think there's certainly some jobs where you want to do a background check. People who are going to be involved in handling your money, maybe they're going to be around children or older people who can't care for themselves, and other jobs, if they're driving, as Steve said, some of the jobs where there's a risk associated with it and you want to make sure they've got a clean record. Maybe if you're a carpenter's assistant or something like that, that's not as important. So think about it in the context of the risk associated with the position. I always love reading these stories about people who embezzle, and people are always surprised that the people who have access to the money are the people who embezzle. Well, who else would be embezzling from a company, right? So if you've got a treasurer, if you've got something like that, then yes, you want to do a credit check. You want to make sure their own credit's in good shape and so on.
And the second part of that question?
Do you want me to take it, Steve, or you?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a fan of a probationary period. If that's what you mean by this, where you have to say, we're going to start you and here's our expectations and we'll revisit your performance at the end of a certain period of time. It keeps both parties, the manager and the worker, kind of on their toes and sets those expectations. But I like to build in what in education they call a formative period of evaluation, where as the worker is beginning to ramp up and understand their responsibilities, the manager is telling them, hey, you did that really well. I loved what you did there. On this piece, I'd like to see a little more of this, or have you tried this other strategy? So that you're having a little dialogue with them. And at the end of that time, you have what's called a summative evaluation, where you sum up and you say, well, here's your probationary period. And all told, I think you did very well. Still a couple things we want to work on, but generally good. So let's move forward. And I think if you invest that time in that kind of strategy, you have a much better outcome, because Steve will tell you this too, but I think it's still true that there's nothing more expensive than a failed hire, where you have to invest your time bringing somebody in and then have to start over again. So I do like those probationary periods with the formative and the summative piece to it.
Thanks, Bill. I agree with Bill. I call it an initial review period.
Mm-hmm.
As probation sometimes makes me think of
like you're in jail.
incarceration.
Yeah. Well said.
So, it's an initial review period. Make sure that's in the employee handbook.
Right.
Okay. Don't spring it on and this is what employers often get into trouble for, doing things that don't make sense. For example, do not bring an employee on and talk about how great they are, and at the end of 90 days or 120 days say, this was an evaluation period and you didn't make it. Okay. And I have actually, yeah, I've seen this happen. You really have to think about when you bring a person on board, what does that really mean? What do you tell the person? What kind of training are you going to give them? Because at the end of 90 days, let's just take any of those examples I gave before. The employee could say, well, you never told me any of this stuff, or you never trained me to do these kinds of things. I didn't know that I was going to have to feed this individual every day. So, in a home healthcare situation. So make sure you go over those things. So I want to say I really appreciate that question, by the way, the 2 questions to Bill, and anything else as we go through this. I would like to hear from somebody, how hard has it been for some of you finding employees and hiring them and getting the person that you need? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
Well,
How
while we're
hard has it been?
waiting for that, I do have a follow-up to that question. And
Sure.
how long should the probation period be for a small retail operation?
Do you want me
Well,
to
again,
tackle that? Go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think some of it depends on the complexity of the job. So this goes back to the reason we have an employee handbook is not only to communicate to the worker, but it forces the employer to think about what's important for me to communicate, right? And so when you've got that job description, you should say, well, if I'm going to be a server in a small restaurant, I expect, it's going to take maybe a week or 2 to figure out everything and how we plate our orders and how we do our, get our checks paid and so on, our bills paid. But in a more complex situation, it may take a little longer. So kind of calibrate the length of time to the complexity of the job is how I would answer it.
I think that's a very good answer. Frequently, you see 90 days or 120 days. But the real thing is to make sure that people understand what they're doing. If it's a retail situation, does the person seem to be proactive in the retail setting? That's what you really want. Someone who's going up, not somebody like I encountered in the mall the other day, who basically says, hey, I don't really care whether you're here or not, we don't have the product. And conveys that, what you want from that employee. Any other comments about what the experience of hiring has been like and the difficulties?
Yeah, we do. John Ann said, I paid for my first employee's training 9 months later. I have to let her go. She slowly disintegrated in her performance. It was a huge financial setback.
Okay. And what maybe if we heard from her, if we unmuted her, what was the lesson she learned from that?
Yeah, John, and if you'd like to add to that chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we can let you open discussion.
So Joanne, just while that's going.
Oh, here she is.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, you can unmute, John Ann.
Mute. There we go. I'm on. You can hear me, correct?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you.
Great. What did I learn from that? Boy, I should have gone with my first gut instinct on this woman, but the owner, the franchisor, thought she would work out well, and right off the bat, the very first interview with this woman didn't go well, but I followed the franchisor's suggestion and hired her. Paid like $12,000 to get her trained, and yeah, she did not live up to anyone's expectations.
Well, I think that it's an illustration to some extent when there are different people interviewing, that you have to reach a consensus on those people. I can only tell you from a long experience in a big firm that reaching consensus sometimes on a hire is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But carefully think about what you want from that individual in terms of a job description. Carefully think about how the person has answered those questions. And if there are disagreements between different people, make clear what it is you're trying to accomplish during the first 9 months, especially if you invest in them as you described in terms of training. So I really appreciate your comment because it brings up something that I've seen over time.
Yep.
And I could give illustrations of it, but I think you already have. We're going to move on a little bit.
Steve, before you jump there, Joanne, who did the training for this employee? The franchise?
It's John Ann.
Oh,
Yes,
John Ann, I'm sorry.
that's okay. No one gets it right the first time.
I think you corrected me before in other workshops.
Well, it's a tough name to see. Nobody really sees the N in between. But
Yeah.
yes, the franchisor did the training.
So you can contact me, but I would go back to the franchise and say your training failed. There's no way you can pay that kind of money for training and have it fail.
Well, I was lucky enough that I got some of the money back. So,
Good.
and I got another technician. So yeah, and she's
And just the other point I would make is that this is where the idea of formative evaluation comes in, which is, weekly, maybe daily feedback during that trial period.
exactly.
And, that's so critical before they get 2 miles off track. You catch them when they're 2 feet off track and get them back. And that's really a great concept to think of. So just to keep that in mind.
Oh, I did, and I implemented that as a matter of fact. This
Great.
this technician and I talk constantly via text message or on the phone, and I meet with her in person at least once a month.
Thank you,
I did
John.
learn. I learned a
That's
big
right.
lesson.
Live and learn, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else who had a comment? Okay. I want to go to now talking about the laws that relate to hiring, because we get a great number of questions about that. And I want to turn it over to Bill, who, by the way, we didn't really introduce him, an expert on employment law, a very experienced lawyer. So Bill, take it away.
Okay. And again, this is just an overview. You can always reach out to me or Steve or any of our colleagues through Teresa or through the chat, and we can go through any of these issues that you have questions about in more detail. I'll start by saying it's a complicated environment, and it's a complicated environment everywhere, but particularly so in Massachusetts. So the key, just like Steve says with your handbook, is to get your setup correct to begin with and make the right decisions about the nature of your workforce and so on, and get the right language in your handbook so that when you're confronted with an issue, you've already thought about how you're going to respond to it. Or if you're confronted with a tax issue, you've already checked with your accountant or someone to make sure that you have a good tax payment scheme, a good withholding scheme. So let me just go through these very quickly for you. The first one is worker classification. And this plays in that a lot of people want to classify their workers as independent contractors because there's less of a financial load on the business. And so they build a business model assuming they're going to pay their workers as independent contractors, and they'll be a little cheaper because they're not paying the employer's share of taxes and contributing to Social Security and so on. Massachusetts, and I'm going to assume all of you are from Massachusetts for now. Different states have different rules, but Massachusetts doesn't like to see workers classified as independent contractors. And there's a 3-part test. I'll try to, when Steve goes back, get the link and see if I can put it in the chat for you. But basically, the critical part to the test is that if the worker is doing the kind of work that your business does, they should be classified as an employee, not an independent contractor. So, for example, if you have a plumbing business and you're putting in plumbing in a house, those folks that you bring in to do your work, the state expects them to be paid as employees, and that means benefits need to be withheld and so on. If you bring in a carpenter, maybe to frame in the bathroom or something like that, that carpenter can be an independent contractor. So the reason I raise this is because even if the worker agrees to be classified as an independent contractor, if they're misclassified, you're not off the hook. And I've seen some very, very frightening, frankly, emails from the Mass Attorney General to small employers who thought they had an agreement with their worker. The worker got dissatisfied and went off and told Mass AG, and the Mass AG came down on them and wanted all sorts of penalties and fees. So I raise this simply to say, build your business plan. If the people should be classified as an employee, build your business plan, build your pricing, anticipate the full cost of having that worker classified correctly. So I-9 is the law that refers to making sure that people who are working in the states are working here legally. Now, this is a huge problem for a lot of people. I know a lot of people in the service industries. I have a couple of clients who have office cleaning businesses, and they can't hire, unfortunately, people who are legal. So I just tell them, look, you're taking a huge risk here. You've got to, this is about a $750,000 business. So I said, if you're ever caught, it's going to be very severe. And when I first talked to him, your penalties are going to be huge. Your back pay and so on. So your financial risk may be more than you're making. So I talked to him about a year and a half ago, and he understood it. And he called me about 6 months ago, and he said, you know what, I'm gonna change my workforce, and I've either got to get out of the business or I'm gonna make sure everybody's working legally. So don't cut that corner. It's a risk you kind of want to put off to the side, and I understand why, but it's not a risk you want to take on, and you don't want to build a business plan on non-compliance with I-9 or misclassifying people. So, discrimination, all the rules that protect workers and so on from interactions with each other or interactions with the supervisors or you as the owner. The key, and a lot of this goes back to Steve's good point about having an employee handbook, but the key is to understand how people should be treated in the workplace and how they shouldn't be treated in the workplace. There's no real magic to it. There's nothing in the discrimination laws that your grandmother wouldn't tell you how to act around people. Treat people professionally, treat them respectfully, don't comment about their personal attributes. Goodness sakes, don't try to date your workers and that sort of stuff. All that just creates, if nothing else, a bad environment. So people tend to turn over. And so you're always looking for new staff. But again, you're taking on a huge financial and reputational risk there. Beth, I'll try to get back to your question in a second here. Again, because the basic rules for worker protection in the United States and certainly in Massachusetts are that the state or the United States doesn't want to be chasing individual employees or individual workers to make sure they've got workers' comp, that they have medical insurance, health insurance, that their taxes are being withheld, and so on. So they put that burden on the employer because they think it's easier for the employer to track those people down and make sure those payments are made. And so this goes back to worker classification. But again, the general theory is that you're going to require the employer to take care of those issues, and then the regulating agency, the state or the federal government, will hold the employer responsible if things aren't done correctly. I'm going to look, so exempt and non-exempt and commissions. I can't go too deeply into that just because I see what time it is here, but just think basically about the first three, which are employees who are exempt from the wage and hour laws, employees who are not exempt from the wage and hour laws, and people who earn commissions. And all of these things are very well described. Am I entitled to pay this person a salary? Or do I have to pay this person hourly and pay them for overtime? Who's entitled to be paid by commission? Is there a minimum wage requirement is associated with that? All I would say is that if you have people that are that you're classifying in anything other than hourly work, you should reach out to us. I'll try to put a link in about that too. They try to explain it pretty clearly. The Mass AG does particularly, but I think it's more than we can really dig in here in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So performance management, just going and, discipline and termination again. This is an at-will state, which means the employee can leave for any reason and no reason, and that you can fire an employee for any reason or no reason unless you've created a contract with them for a term of service or so on. So it's important that in your offer letters and in your handbook, you say that you are an at-will employee. And that means unless you're firing them for a bad faith reason, like you're discriminating against them or something like that, you can fire them with no risk. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be sued. And that's why something we didn't put on here, but in terms of risk management, is that you want to make sure that you've got good insurance in place that will respond, even if you did all the right things and did it the right way, but you get sued anyway. People sue sometimes, just even though they know they're wrong. So, discipline, I talked a little bit about earlier in the context of managing performance. If you have to discipline an employee, unless it's something really egregious, and your handbook will say this, and again, you have that right to terminate an employee for no reason. You don't even have to give them a reason. But if you've got what's called progressive discipline, somebody made a mistake, but you want to give them a second chance, I think it's critical to be clear about what went wrong, what your expectations are for performance going forward. And again, to monitor that and reach out in a certain period of time. And then to say, if we used to use the phrase a lot, we expect to see immediate and sustained improvement. So we would articulate the issue and then say, we're going to review this and we don't want to see it again. And we want to start seeing improvement. And then after a certain period of time, that goes along behind. All I will say about the final one here, confidentiality and non-compete. Poaching, I'll say this first, unless you've got an agreement with somebody, and you can have those with your clients to say that your clients can't poach your employees. And I'm actually litigating a case where that's one of the issues right now. Non-competes in Massachusetts are different from other states. I'll just say briefly, the old kind of non-competes you used to see are no longer effective. I'll see if I can put a link in, but if not, just reach out to me and I can explain pretty quickly the requirements for you to be able to enforce a non-compete. And they're typically against only salaried employees now, not hourly employees. Confidentiality clauses are great in theory, but they're awfully hard to kind of vindicate if you think somebody has breached and is doing this. If you're a small business, you have to ask yourself the reality of how much time and frankly money you have to try to do that. So again, back to Steve's point, try to hire people that have integrity if confidentiality is an issue, and continue to enforce those things, and be careful with who gets what information. Are these Q&As for me, or let's see? Beth, all the rules about retaining documentation and so on are very well laid out. If you can't find them, just email me and I'll send you a link to those. But it's all very clear about how long you have to save things for and all of that stuff. Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
question, and I'm not sure if this is something that you would know, but do you know what up to what age do teens need working papers?
I'm sorry?
Up to what age do teens need working papers? Do you know?
I don't know that. I don't even know, I've never thought about it that way. There are laws about the age at which a person can begin to work and the age under which they can't work. But after that, the working papers is just a function of the I-9 classification. Are you legally in the United States, and are you legally allowed to work in the United States? So if you're a US citizen and you're 16 and you're working in a job where you can work at 16, then that's all you need. But you're going to have to provide that documentation through the I-9 process as part of the employee's onboarding. And Phil, to your point, you can hire, there's a couple ways you can hire a person who is non-resident. Somebody who's a permanent resident is work authorized in the United States. Usually people who are on H visas can only work for their employer, although sometimes their spouse can get a visa that lets them be work eligible anywhere in the States. The other classification that comes to mind is what's called practical training and optional practical training for students who are over here, and they first go to work as part of their program to get some practical training. And then there's what's called an optional practical training that extends the right to work for a period of, I think, a year to 2 years after graduation, provided that the employment is in the field of the student's study. Okay.
Okay. I'd just like to add one thing to what Bill said about discrimination from my experience working in as a non-lawyer in things, is that always remember the key words job related. If you're going to make a comment about somebody's performance, it's job related. If you're going to make a comment about pay, it's job related. I once sat in a meeting with a very prestigious healthcare system where there was a complaint from a woman who was a pediatrician about her salary and whether she had been discriminated against. Her husband was a surgeon. And the CEO turned to us and said, "Oh my gosh, she's a woman. Her husband makes all this money. Why do we have to pay her more?" And I just literally said, never repeat that again in public, anywhere. If this is the situation that you're paying her less because she's married to a rich man and you think that that's okay when it comes to a wife, that's going to be ipso facto. I don't see why that's discriminatory. These were very educated people. But I've heard people make comments about Black people, about white people, about gay people, about Hispanic people. That's what leads to discrimination problems.
Right.
So always think the words job related as you think about managing performance. We do live in a time of uncertainty where paradox, that is, two things can be true at the same time, seems even more prevalent. In other words, you are small business entrepreneurs. You are hard driving. You're looking at all the kinds of tough issues you're facing in terms of cash flow, in terms of wages going up, supplies and raw materials going up, and yet you have to give an employee faith in the future. That's what's going to help you find the right employee and keep that right employee motivated. Now, we at SCORE are seeing the pace of new business applications remaining high. And at the same time, I hear all the time, the demand for employees has been, I have a favorite local sort of restaurant I go to, sandwich shop occasionally here in where I live. And, I know the owner, and what's the first thing out of the owner's mouth all the time? I can't find the people I need. Okay. And I can't afford to pay them. Well, how's your business doing? I can't keep up with the demand. So we're seeing very unusual things. We're seeing high inflation with high unemployment. So you've got to be creative about the way you approach your talent so that they become more resilient. Among other things, the rate of abuse of, for example, waiters in restaurants has gone up by almost twice. So a waiter and a waitress have to be prepared to deal with things. You need motivated employees. And then the question comes up, is your business a talent magnet? Do you walk the talk that you sort of told people about? And are you getting people, are you thinking about how can I attract people to my business? Okay. So I'd like to hear from anybody who thinks they are thinking about this issue. Does anybody think that they have a business that's a talent magnet, that you're walking the walk, that you're doing things to get people in? Anybody out there?
There is a comment in chat about finding talent.
Okay.
While we're
Did we hear
waiting
from
for
that
something.
person?
Well, it was a chat from a bit ago, so let me read that out, and if they want,
Okay.
if you want to add to it, we can. Locating qualified candidates is our biggest challenge. The industry, massage therapy, has changed a lot post-pandemic. What tips do you have regarding marketing for finding new employees?
Okay. I guess I'd ask that employee first, how does he or she, that's why if that person could come on live, what is she or doing already? Could that person come online?
If they want to, they can raise their hand.
Okay, they raise their
Yep,
hand.
okay, yep, here we go. Okay, you can unmute.
Palace?
Yes. So
Okay.
we have worked out, we have reached out to the massage schools near us. We've reached out to former employees, former teachers. We've been working with SCORE and We Can on Cape Cod. We're using LinkedIn, we're using social media, there's no candidates that aren't already working.
Okay, so I just want to point out that you answered your question to some extent for other people. The first source of employees is really wherever people are trained, like massage schools. The second source is referrals. The third source is LinkedIn and social media. There is no magic bullet for finding people. How short of talent are you, Palace?
We are down to 2 practitioners, and pre-pandemic, there were 9 of us.
Okay,
So we are booked out substantially. We need at least 2 more full-time.
so you need at least 2 more full-time. And where are you located?
Dennis, Cape Cod.
Okay, so you're on the Cape. So you've got to look at how can I get people to move or come to the Cape? Because there's probably not enough talent in terms of massage on the Cape, is there?
Probably not, but there's also no housing available on the Cape.
Right,
The
it's
housing
very
problem that you have
expensive.
on the Cape. So one of the issues that people have been dealing with in hiring is how to address that housing situation. I can't help you right now to talk through these issues. I know you're working with SCORE already, but I want to point out, first of all, I want to thank you for speaking. And I want to point out that you are doing all the major things you can be doing, and that it is a persistent kind of effort. What happens often is people go on to LinkedIn and they look once or twice and then they stop. You've got to keep those sort of communication out there going so that, again, people recognize that your company is a talent magnet. Why would somebody want to work with you? Would you
Can I
say?
suggest a couple of things you might think of?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so first, I think, as Steve said, times have changed, Palace, and I think that may mean that your profit margins may need to change. Maybe they already have, but I think the reality is, labor has the upper hand a little bit right now. So they can move, and we're competing for, especially for trained people. So that means that maybe you need to revisit your business model a little bit, at least in the short term. A couple of things you might think of is one is to anticipate the housing issue and maybe provide a sign-on bonus or little bonus after they complete their first 3 months. You might think about entering into a deal where you help defray the tuition costs for a given student in exchange for coming to work for you for a period of time when they graduate. Just different ways to Steve's earlier point, to provide, and I know he's going to talk about this in the deal, but different ways to kind of relieve the financial pressure or address the financial pressure on somebody who is being asked to move to a higher cost area. So those are a couple of things, but I really sadly think that the first one that I mentioned is more often than not the answer, which is you just got to revisit your profit margin expectations.
I think the other thing, though, to think about is your company a talent magnet?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'd ask Palace, what makes your company different than every other massage company? Could you answer that question? Palace, you still there?
No, sorry, she's not.
Okay.
I can bring her back if you want.
Because that's one of the questions. But maybe you could bring her back if she can
Yep.
come back.
Yep. Okay.
Palace, that puts you on the spot a little bit. What makes your company different than every other massage company?
We've restructured our pay scale, so there's no commission at all anymore. So it's a consistent paycheck. People get paid more than they would with a commission-based model.
Excellent.
Right.
We've added retirement plan with
Excellent.
matching. We've added PTO that kicks in at a year. We've talked about doing a sign-on / retention bonus, but we
Yeah.
haven't actually implemented that yet.
So I just want to say that she's thinking about how to make her company a talent magnet.
Mhm.
And that's what we have to do. Now, the other thing that you need sometimes in this system is payroll system, and those can be helpful. But don't delegate management to the system. What do I mean?
And Steve,
by
just before you move on, I'm sorry. Do you know, Palace, and then I'll stop, why any of those 9 people left that might inform things you might do more of or less of or differently?
Well, one of them died. 2 of them left the industry.
That's a hard problem to
Yeah,
solve
there's
as
a-
a manager.
Yes, one of them left for other medical reasons. Another one left for a seasonal job that pays a lot more. I don't know if anyone's heard of Chatham and Chatham pricing. I am not in the Chatham demographic. So
Mhm.
that's way above what I can afford and what I
Yeah.
would want to charge my client base.
Right.
So
So
all
she
of
makes-
those things are very, very interesting in terms of what you have to face and will face in hiring. The loss of employees for any number of reasons, especially because physically, being a masseuse requires, physical effort and people sometimes come and go in those businesses. But whatever you do, you have to think about how to become a talent magnet. I just threw in one other thing here, which is, a payroll system can be helpful to you in managing certain things. I'm sure most of you have them, but make sure there's a lot of advertisement now. As I mentioned, with these payroll systems that claim that they can help you to deal with discrimination, that they can deal with all sorts of employee issues. Don't delegate management to the system. The same thing with all these ads about Indeed and other companies. The kinds of things that Palace is doing are important and they make a difference. Now, the other thing about today and about talent is to be a leader today, you got to manage yourself effectively because you're the scarcest resource. Take care of yourself with checklists, counselors, canaries. Canaries are the people who will tell you what's happening in your coal mine. Okay, before there is a problem. There's a lot of paradox. You got to stay strong and at the same time be responsive to employees because they're the keys. You've got to breathe new life into the organization all the time without becoming change weary, which many people are right now. The keys are often around listening and staying humble, making sure you're listening to your customers and your employees as much as you can. There is a deal in every company, in every organization, And in uncertain times, all the more important. Basically, the deal is, what do I give and what do I get? And I really liked what Palace had to say about what she's trying to give and what she's trying to get. And what does the company give and get? And what does the employee give and get? Salaries, especially as we have mentioned, have lagged for years and now they're catching up. But benefits costs have been cut back and their cost has gone up. So it sounded like Palace was doing some very important things to enhance the total rewards, the deal that she's offering. There is a supply and demand problem in hiring because many more people, it's not that so much that people don't want to work, it's that they've made other life choices. They've decided they don't want to do that kind of job. We're finding people who've left their jobs to start new businesses. So employees are asking for more, and their purchasing power has actually gone down, even if wages are up. So people often ask us, so what's a way we can motivate employees without pay? How can I incentivize them? Well, the issue is there are no magic bullets for that. But I would say that the more you offer and understand their needs, like housing, like other kinds of needs, you find out that pay is not the deciding factor in taking a job or for staying very often. Now, if you're talking about Wall Street, that's something different. But when you talk about what people want out of a restaurant, like Daryl's Kitchen and Bar in Roxbury, where Nia Grace has sort of talked about the kind of environment she wants to have. She keeps employees who could work at other restaurants, and that's what's critical. So you got to clarify the deal for employees. We often talk about it as the total rewards. There's a job, but that's not enough. There's pay and benefits. There's working conditions, and Palace mentioned that. There's training and development. There's providing a supportive and flexible work environment, a chance to grow with the company. And we're not going to have too much time to sort of answer these questions because we're getting near to 1 o'clock. But the question is always with total rewards, how do you convince a prospective employee, if you get one, about the value of your package and its relevance to them? Is it innovative? And what we heard from Palace is that although she may not be able to get that many employees and she's in the Chatham area, she can't compete with Chatham wages. There's issues of housing on the Cape. She's trying to be innovative. She's trying to think about what the value of the package could be. And as Bill mentioned, if you pay for training, if you pay special attention to the individual, flexible hours, it can always make a difference. In these times, there's a natural tendency to shy away from anger and conflict, especially if an individual is not performing at a high level. Because of the high stress we're seeing, increasing work demands, as I mentioned in restaurants, the number of ways that that people after the pandemic came back and abused employees. So you've got to demonstrate empathy, that is the ability to, walk in people's shoes, not just sympathy, not feeling sorry for them. Thinking about contingency plans, how to help them through this situation, this crisis. Be a leader that can be trusted with the good and bad news, and to be transparent about the state of the company. And that's hard for entrepreneurs because they often don't want to talk about the finances of their company. Well, in a time when there is uncertainty, there are a lot of things you can still do. In a small company, you are the brand and the promise. Hope is a discipline, we now know, and you're the role model for employees. There are lots of legal issues, but remember, you also have to pay attention to what's most important. You can't show panic or depression, and yet at the same time, you can't pretend that everything is the same. Be ready, don't overreact to the what ifs. The cost of goods are going up. Uncertainty is going to be with us for a while. But what we tried to do in this short talk, and then I'll let Bill end it, is to sort of say, uncertainty is part of the environment of running a business. It's here to stay. But we really believe at SCORE that you can chart a course for growth if you focus on opportunity for yourself and for your business. We're here to help you. We know we didn't answer all the questions today, but we hope we've given you an overview of what's really important in hiring, managing, and developing employees. Bill, any final words?
I guess just this, which is, we have a lot of people just in our chapter who have successfully negotiated in their own small business, many business cycles, up and down. So as Steve said, you know, this is an overview. We want you to have meaningful takeaway, but our data shows that people who have 3 sessions with a mentor have a 75% higher chance of either growing their business or having their business stay in business. So there's nothing that replaces that free mentoring. So take advantage of it if you can fit it in your schedule. We'll get a team of experts behind you to really dig down and give you your best shot of making your business succeed.
Thanks, and have a good day.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
Bill and Teresa, if you could stay on afterwards.
Sure. Thanks for that final comment, everybody.
Thank you.
Well,
I have a question about how do you reach Bill and Steve? You can contact me through outreach@scoreboston.org, and I can share their scheduling